please give the loudest welcome you can to your fellow member and keynote, Gary Teeny. Come on up, Gary. Gary, thanks for doing this.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So, as you know, I have a couple of things. So, Gary, can you tell us a little bit about what your upbringing was like in the South?
Well, I was born on an Air Force base. I was an Air Force brat. And my dad was a great golfer. And whenever a general wanted to win a tournament, somehow my dad would get transferred. So I was on pretty much every Air Force base in Texas, but I was really too young to remember that. And I got used to moving a lot when I was little.
And then eventually you guys wound up in Arkansas, is that right?
Yeah. Graduated high school in Little Rock, Arkansas. In fact, just went back for my 45th high school reunion, and my wife just loves hearing all my old friends just razz me into the ground about, you won't believe what he did the night of, kind of stuff.
So now you had an interesting upbringing. You had sales training early on from two different fronts. So can you talk about the door-to-door sales that you kind of got, you started out with?
Yeah. My dad was a Jehovah's Witness, which meant I was a Jehovah's Witness, which meant Saturdays and Sundays, I was the 10-year-old kid that might have come up to your house and said, I've got a Watchtower and Awake for you that'll save your life. So for me,
that's a magazine for people that don't know.
Yeah, that's that they're all about what it's all about in the Jehovah's Witness world. And for me, I guess a lot of people were trained in sales that you got to make a sale or die, kind of in the sales world. Well, the way I was brought up, every sale I made saved someone who died and got them to go to heaven. So it wasn't about me. It was about, at a 10-year-old kid, I thought I was, saving people. So I didn't have that fear of sales as I got into the world of sales and broadcasting and stuff.
So you never had the fear of rejection?
No, and I came through sales when people yelled and screamed at salespeople. In fact, I had a sales manager. It was crazy. He said, we're going to meet in a town we don't sell in. I was working in New Orleans. And he pulled out a $100 bill at breakfast and said, I'm going to give this $100 bill. Now, that's like 1977. A $100 bill in 1977 was a big deal. And he said, I want the person who here's the worst thing said to them, come back at lunch. And so we did that, and we had all these stories of people that were abusing us when we tried to sell them radio advertising. And then he pulled out another $100 bill and said, we're going to do it in the afternoon. Now, at lunch in those days, we drank. And so I walk into a business, and this guy yells, what, another salesman? Get the blankety blank blank out of here. And I go, I have been in your presence all of about 3 seconds, and you are this angry? Obviously, it has nothing to do with me. What is going on? And all of the air came out of him, and he goes, I'm getting a divorce, and this is this, and this is that. And 45 minutes later, I have to peel out of there. And I really got in that moment, no matter what they say, in that kind of a situation, it really doesn't have anything to do with me. And it really that was the second thing that changed who I was in communicating with people, and maybe that's why you had communication.
Yeah, because not only did you work in the communications field, you do a lot of great communications. Your dad was also an RV salesman.
Oh, so part of an early consulting lesson I might have got, my dad had two businesses. One sold RVs and mobile homes. The other had a mobile home lot. The RVs made a lot of money. The mobile home lot sucked a lot of that money out. And so I learned the value of really watching profit streams to make sure both were profit streams, because as it turned out, it really caused a lot of problems in our family that one of the businesses didn't work.
And what was the technique that your dad used to close a sale? Didn't he have...
Oh, every summer, my dad would let me bring two of my buddies on the journey from Helena, Arkansas to Florida. Now, that was cool, because we'd be in like a $175,000 motorhome. We'd pull into campgrounds where everyone was in tents or sweating to death in the summer, and we'd have 3 air conditioners going and the 8-track playing Jimi Hendrix. So we were pretty cool. And I asked my dad one time, I said, Dad, why do you keep getting people to say yes to like, do you like where the thermostat is? And what do you think of this double oven? And you like that? And he'd go, well, Gary, if I can get him to say yes 27 times, it's easier when I say, do you want 1 or 2 motorhomes on your lot, for them to say yes then. And I kind of learned the rhythm of how to communicate through the sales process with my dad as a teenager.
So then you went on to college, went to Arkansas, right?
Oh, yeah. So that was an interesting moment. I had worked in my dad's businesses all through junior high and high school, mowing grass and digging ditches and filling in ditches. And my dad would always say, this money's going into your college fund. So I had my very best friend from high school. He and I were going into chemical engineering. I had him as my roommate. I had my dorm. I was in the bookstore, and because I passed all freshman courses, I was going into second-year courses, and those books were a little more expensive. So I called my dad on the payphone and said, Dad, I'm about to fill out the check. It's going to be a little more than what we thought. I just want to give you a heads up. And my dad goes, Gary, I'm not going to be able to help you like I told you I would. And I go, okay, I can get a job. How much are you going to be able to help me? And he goes, none. And so I didn't get my college roommate. I didn't go to the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville. I ended up putting myself through school at the University of Arkansas in Little Rock. And so early on, I learned that, it doesn't always turn out like you like, but there's always a plan B.
So how did you get into the radio industry? Because I know a big part of your time was spent in radio. I
had a best friend who I thought loved me dearly, talked me into getting out of chemical engineering and going into insurance sales. So I sold disability income for Paul Revere, which is a great company, and I could only sell to owners and managers. And I ran out of categories, so I was looking in the yellow pages for categories, and I got to radio, and I go, oh, I like to listen to the radio. I'll call on radio managers. And one manager had a 6A to 10A radio show on an AM station in Little Rock, Arkansas, and he would never see me. He would walk past me with an appointment. He wouldn't meet me at a lunch appointment. I finally called him and I said, Larry, do you eat breakfast before you go on the show? And he goes, yeah. And I said, hey, I'll meet you at your house at 5 a.m. We'll have breakfast, which was right across from the radio station, and I'll drop you off. And he goes, okay. I knock on his door at 5 a.m., and I hear this bustling and banging and clanging, and this woman in a robe with curlers, those big curlers that women used to wear in the 70s, opens the door and goes, what are you doing knocking on my door in the middle of the night? And I go, well, I have an appointment with Larry for breakfast. And she slams the door in my face. I hear this screaming and yelling, and the next thing I know, she pushes Larry out the door in his boxer shorts, holding his shoes, socks, pants, and shirt. We get in my car, and the second time I do that to him, he says, Teeny, you're working for me, man. And I said, no, I got this job in insurance, and I'm going to do this and that. And he makes me an offer. And I go, wow, that sounds pretty good. And I go back to my boss and I said, Tom, one of my clients made me this offer. And Tom, my boss in the insurance, goes, Gary, you don't want to work in radio. My next door neighbor is in radio. He manages a station. Why don't we call him and he'll tell you what it's like? And he calls his next door neighbor and says, hey, we want to come over. We go over to his next door neighbor's house. He says, Gary just got an offer to work at KLO and KZ. And the owner goes, oh, Burning Man, he's one of the best radio broadcasters I know. He was just elected president of the National Radio Broadcasters Association. He starts shaking my hand. And Tom goes, why are you telling him that? He goes, what am I supposed to tell him? And that's how I ended up in radio.
So, and I found these pictures of you. That's you. Is that prom? What is?
Well, that's me getting married to the mother of my children, and that's me on the left. Wow, where did you find that?
I do my research.
Yeah, that.
BP, if you could close that.
Yeah, that's not the me today. That's two of me. I've doubled. That's mini me, and that's maxi me. Yeah, that's me at 16 years old in the Ozarks.
So take us, I thought that would be some memory lane pictures. When I found them, I'm like, we got to use that.
Wow.
So take us through the days of radio. So you got into radio. Now there was the AM. This is the interesting thing because, we're talking about podcasting, but back then FM was new.
Oh, yeah. I worked for the AM, and we would pass out FM converters that you plugged into your AM radio so you could listen to the FM. Yeah, so I ended up, the number one salesperson left, and I got his list in Little Rock, and he got a job as a sales manager down in New Orleans, and he would call me like every couple of weeks, Gary, you got to come to New Orleans. And I'd go, Bob, I got your list. I'm now the #1 salesperson. I'm in heaven. And I went in and told Larry, I said, Larry, tell Bob to quit calling me, because Larry and Bob were friends. And he says, Gary, Bernie's about to sell the stations. And you know Bernie. Bernie was a great Jewish businessman. Probably learned more that year working with Bernie than I did in the next 5 years of radio. He said, you should go eat Bob's steak. So I went down to New Orleans and had a great weekend and fell madly in love with the town. You know, if you've been in Little Rock, Arkansas, New Orleans is quite exciting. And that's how I ended up down in New Orleans.
So now you cut your teeth on black radio at the time. So can you paint a picture? Because now that's the hottest radio, right? It was black radio at the same time.
In New Orleans, with 70% black, it was gigantic, and I was working for the AM, and we turned our FM from Christian to jazz, and basically because we didn't have anyone else, they made me the manager of the jazz station. And so you know, with your jazz event coming up, I'm going to do everything I can to get there, because I'm madly in love with jazz music. I had the pleasure, because we had such a small staff, of taking Earl Klug from, you know, the clubs to the record shops for signings. And I'm in backstage at one of the jazz clubs one night, and I see Al Jarreau backstage, and I see him wave at someone. So I turn around and look to see who he's waving at, and he goes, Gary, don't you remember me? You interviewed me about 6 months ago. No, yeah, I remember you. I can't believe you remember me. You know, and so it was just that magic of the moment when jazz musicians were just so happy to be playing jazz. They were just normal, regular people. I got a call one Thursday night, and they said, Gary, come down to the club. It's about 10 o'clock at night. And I go, man, it's a school night. I got to work tomorrow. And they go, it's Stevie Wonder's birthday, and they've reserved the club, and I'll get you in. I go, okay. I threw clothes on. I'm down there. I'm drinking free and eating free. And I get bumped into, and I go, excuse me. And I turn around, and it's Stevie Wonder. And I go, excuse me. And he got up with the Tramps. They flew the Tramps in from California, and he played for 4 hours. And I am standing on a table about that size with two honeys holding on to a pole, jamming for about 4 hours, dancing on the tabletop. And that's the kind of magic we had the opportunity back in those days.
That's one of my favorite performers, is Stevie Wonder.
Oh gosh, it's just rocking it.
Now you had different mentors, but didn't you have a mentor when you were working sales that challenged you to think bigger? Can you share that story? Because you were just happy being a salesperson, making good money and hanging out with all these amazing artists.
Well, you were talking about the tenets. Number 2 tenet is planning. And my mentor goes, Gary, so what's your goal? And I wanted to be a sales manager, and I hadn't been one yet. And I said, ooh, I want to be a sales manager. He said, oh, that's good, that's good. He said, and then what's your goal? And I go, oh, and then I want to be a general manager. He says, that's good, that's good. And then he says, and then what's your goal? And I didn't have a goal after that. I was like, I want to impress him, so I made up, I want to own a radio station. He said, oh, that's good, that's good. And how much have you saved for your radio station? I go, and I was making really good money. I had like $8,000 sitting in my checking account. And I go, $8,000. He said, oh, that's good, that's good. And he said, you never spend that money. I go, what do you mean? He goes, you don't. That's for your radio station. You don't spend that money. I go, well, I might put it on a down payment on a car or something. He goes, well, then you're a lying blankety blankety blank blank blank, and you'll never own a radio station. And I thought about that, and I said, well, I'm having way too much fun to save cash. So that's when I bought my first house and put 2 apartments in it. And then I moved to New Orleans and put 3 apartments in it. And then in the house in New Orleans, I put 3 more apartments and lived in the first story. So at 28 years old, I got 6 apartments, and I'm a slumlord, if you will, a landlord, and free car, free insurance, living free. They're paying the utilities, and I saved enough money to put down on my first 2 radio stations.
So that conversation, though, expanded your thinking, him challenging you from being a salesperson to thinking bigger.
It really set me on the path, and he really told me exactly what to do it. And he was so smart and so rich, I figured, well, that probably is something I ought to do.
So now, you weren't a public speaker at the time, right?
Oh, no.
Now, I know that someone asked you if you would speak at a conference. Can you tell us that story? Can you tell?
I was working at WGSO. WGSO was the Jazz, basketball, and Saints football station, News Talk. And we did some sales training, and one of the sales trainings was always ask your client to buy. And so one of my clients was a savings and loan, and every time I see him, I'd ask him to buy, afternoon drive or morning drive or sponsorship of something. And one day I go to pick up a tape, and they go, "What do you got for us, Gary?" And I go, "Oh, it's good. You're going to love it, but it's not quite ready." And I go back to the station, and I go, "I need help. These people want to buy something, and I don't have a clue. We've sold them everything on the station." We did a green light session. We came up, there was First National Bank of Jefferson Parish, so we created a first person contest. So write in someone that was first person in your life, and whoever wrote in got $100, and whoever they nominated got $100, and that went on. And at the end, a winner was picked for $1,000. The owner of the chain, Fred Walker, said he flew into town. He said, "Gary, that promotion you did really did good, didn't I?" go, "Oh yeah, it was great." And he said, "Why don't you submit it to the National Radio Broadcasters Association Client Station Contest?" And I go, "Oh, appreciate you thinking of me, Fred, but it's really busy right now." And he said, "I thought I owned the chain." And I said, "Fred, I was thinking about submitting that contest." And I did.
He was the owner of the chain of radio stations.
Oh yeah, he's a big dog. And I submitted and got a telegram. That's in the 70s. You got telegrams when you did cool things that said I was number 2 in the United States. And fortunately for me, when they flew me to Washington, D.C. to speak, I had taken a, what is it?
Toastmasters.
Toastmasters, yeah. Gosh, that's been 40-something years ago. And they said, always review the room you're about to speak in. And so I'm getting the registration and all that stuff, and I say, "Do you mind showing me the room I'm going to speak in tomorrow morning?" And I said, "Sure." And they walked me down, and they opened some doors like that. And imagine this times about 8. And I said, "Oh, you're going to shut those big sliding things off for my deal tomorrow?" And they go, No, you're speaking to 3,000 people in the morning." And I went, "Oh!" And I got pretty scared, and I went back to the hotel room and
you were like, what, 27?
Yeah, it's pretty scary.
Yeah, what do you know about speaking to 3,000 people, your first presentation?
Yeah, I'd never done that before. And I presented the next day, and I sat down next to the guy beside me, and I said, "Did I say anything intelligent?" Because it was like, whew. And this guy walked up to me and he said, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you about managing my station in Texas." And I said, "I appreciate the offer, but I got this job I love in New Orleans." He said, "Boy, I didn't offer you a job. I just said I wanted to talk to you about a job." And I laughed, and he started calling me. And he finally said, "Do you like road trips?" And I was dating a girl that was really good on road trips. She would bring a cheese tray and a bottle of wine, and we'd have the best time on, those one-tank trip things. And I said, "Yeah, I love road trips." And he said, "Well, I'll pay for everything. Just come." And so we went, and she and I both fell in love with the radio station, and that was my first general manager.
And that was in
Beaumont, Texas.
Okay, and that was with Ken, right?
Ken Stevens, yeah.
And I believe was Vidor one of the cities?
Vidor, Texas, yeah. We had a 1,000-watt Class C FM. That's the big dog FM. And people were so impressed because they didn't know we were in a trailer at the bottom of the tower. Yeah. That's probably why my hair's thin, because you had to put your fluorescent tubes in cabinets, because if you left them out on the desk, they'd light up at night. Yeah, we was microwaved. We didn't have to turn the heat up in that place very much.
And how did you do as far as sales when you got into that station at Vidor, Texas?
Well, I'll describe it like this. I was madly in love with a girl, and we broke up, and it broke my heart. And I called Ken. I'd been there about 1.5 years, and I said, "Ken, you're going to have to fire me." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Man, I am so messed up right now. It's probably costing you $10,000 a month." He said, "Gary, you made me over $1 million last year. Get well. What do I need to do to get your head back together?" Yeah, it had been good. In fact, probably 10 years ago, Ken calls me and says, "Gary, I've put you in my will." He's a multimillionaire and a nice guy. In fact, we're probably going to go dive in the spring.
So now, something happened that was interesting. You delegated. You were the general manager of the station, and while you were gone, something happened that I think most people would freak out if they were managing a station.
Well,
can you talk about that occasion?
It'll lead up to that. Ken called me one day and he said, "Gary, there's 2 tickets to Cozumel." Ken and I were both divers. And he said, "You're going out of town." I said, "Oh, no, Ken, I got this I got to do, and I got this I got to do." I'd gone 10 years without ever taking a vacation in radio. And he said, "No, Gary, you're going to get burned out. And if you get burned out, I'm going to have to come back to work because Ken thought his job as the owner was to travel to a different foreign country every year. So he forced me
every
to
year,
leave.
every month. It was
Excuse me, every month, yeah.
Right, that's what I thought.
This guy does a good pre-interview, I'm telling you. And so I go, and about 6 months later, Ken calls me, says, Teeny, there's 2 tickets to Cozumel, and if you come back in 3 days instead of 5, I'm not giving you a Christian burial. And I got it about, maybe there's something to recharging your batteries. So Ken was in Machu Picchu, and I'm going to Europe for my first European adventure. And I tell all of my team, I say, look, this was before cell phones and being internet and stuff. I said, you know me, I know you. If there's any problem, if you play full out to fix it, I'll cover your butt. So just whatever it is, just do the very best you can, and when I get back, we'll talk about it and we'll get it handled. So I'm gone for 10 days. I come back. I'm sitting at a stack at my desk, probably that high. The operations director comes in white as a ghost. He goes, Gary, did you read the memo? I go, Dave, I just got here. Look at this stack. What's the memo say? We'd gotten hit by lightning, that 1,000-foot tower is also a lightning rod, and we were knocked off the air. He got a crew, cost us $23,000 for the crew to fix it. I'm looking at the bill and I'm going, oh, Dave, this crew's daily rate probably saved us $3 to $5 grand. Now, the copper coax, you have copper coax going up a 1,000-foot tower that's that big around. I said, I probably could have saved a few $100s because I knew a tower that was coming down in Dallas. We could have bought their used stuff, which is fine. So you probably saved us $4 grand. Congratulations. And I gave him a big bonus. And that's when I realized if I'm managing, I don't have to be there. In fact, I was actually impressed with who they were while I was gone. And that one moment changed my management career. It really got me present to, it's all about chain of command, as our partner here, Paul, would tell you.
So how did you wind up owning your own station? So this is, you're general manager, you've done all this amazing stuff. How were you able to buy, you bought 2 radio stations?
Well, first of all, because I had a mentor, I got enough money from my rental properties to have a pretty nice chunk of change. And then one of my old competitors from New Orleans owned 2 stations in Beaumont, and he calls me and says, hey, Gary, I'm flying to town. Why don't you meet me and let's grab a bite? And, he was an intense, wonderful competitor. And I said, oh, yeah, I'd love to catch up with you. Grabbed him. We went across the interstate to a hotel. He says, I want you to manage my 2 stations. I go, oh, no, I got this job. And he goes, Gary, I know you want ownership. I'll give you a percentage if you hit goals. Ooh. So I go back to Ken, my buddy, and I say, Ken, I've just gotten an offer to own. You know I've always wanted to own. He goes, Gary, I never told you I was going to own. I said, I know you never told me, but I'm going to take this deal. And he came back over that Monday with a 32-page document to give me ownership in K106, and I read it, and I came back the next day and I said, Ken, I love you like a brother, but this isn't an ownership manual. This is indentured servitude. If you sneeze or I sneeze, I could lose everything. So I'm going to take the deal. Now, the good news is Ken and I are still best of friends. I talked to him, this weekend about, his newest honey and the adventures that he was going on. And I'm still in his will as far as I know. But I ended up doing so well that Dick Oppenheimer came to me the next couple of years and said, Teeny, you're the only manager in the chain that's hit the percentage goals. I'm going to sell off the chain. If you want to buy these 2,
wow.
I'll sell it to you.
So here you have your opportunity to buy.
Yeah.
How did you buy those 2
well,
stations?
What I didn't know was that during the oil bust in Texas, pretty much every Texas bank was being bought out.
What year are we talking about?
87.
87, yeah. Okay, right. Everything was crashing.
Oh, yeah. And so I had developed a banker the whole time I was in Beaumont for 7 years, telling me, I'm going to buy a radio station someday. And I'd talk to other influential clients that had lots of money. I'm going to buy a radio station if you'd like to invest with me. And pretty much, people who had said, oh, yeah, I'm going to invest with you. Teeny, I got money, but I'm in with 4 other doctors, and they can't pay because of all this is going on, and so I'm carrying the note on all of our investments or whatever. I got turned down from like 8 different banks. I'll never forget, as long as I live, I got turned down from the 8th bank, and I go home in the middle of the day, And I pull the shades, and I'm laying on the bed, and I go, I give. And I'm laying there, and I go, wow, this will be the moment 40 years from now when I gave up. And I drug myself out of that bed, and I went out into the light of day in Texas, when Beaumont, Texas is pretty bright in the middle of the day, and I felt like a vampire coming out, of the darkness. I was blinded by the light and probably had a few tears in my eyes, and said, I'm going to the Ninth Bank. And I got a deal. It wasn't a good deal. I mean, we had to put $250,000 CDs up against a $1.5 million loan, but we got the deal, and that's how I got the first two stations with some investors.
Now, what was the formats of those two stations? What did you call them?
I had, beautiful music.
Does anyone know what beautiful music is?
If you rode up in the elevator and...
It's elevator music.
Yeah.
So he bought a station that had beautiful music. And what was the other one?
Christian AM, KDOV.
So
Yeah.
how did you convince people to advertise on the beautiful music station? Because I'm assuming they're going to say, I don't want to market on an elevator music station.
Well, one of my best friends and one of my best clients owned an advertising agency, and I'm all excited, and I'm buying KQXY and KDOV. She goes, oh, Gary, I'm not going to be able to buy advertising on your FM. I go, oh, why is that, Ann? Well, because it's beautiful music and nobody hears the commercials. And I'd already signed the deal with Dick, and I was like, oh, I didn't think of that, because he'd been a competitor, and I was doing pretty good against him. And I said, well, Ann, do you mind if I think about that? And if I can figure out, something that'll change your mind, do you mind if I come back and talk to you about it? And she said, oh, sure, Gary. So I thought about it and thought about it and thought about it, and I came back and I said, Ann, what is the most powerful form of advertising? And I knew what she was going to say. She said, word of mouth. And I said, absolutely. Word of mouth is the most powerful form of advertising. But what is so powerful that they've outlawed it, that it's illegal to, at subliminal level, show Coke and popcorn in movies? And she goes, subliminal advertising, yeah. And I said, you can't even say don't steal in a department store at an inaudible level. I said, it's outlawed, but guess what? We can run your tire store client on our station, and then you'll walk out and won't even realize that your tires are getting a little bald, and you'll go, I need to go to Lee's Tires and get new tires. And it was because of subliminal advertising. And she looked at me and she said, okay, Gary, I'll advertise. And fortunately, that and some other crazy things we did actually turned it into a very successful station.
Now, you also had another promotion where you gave away a Rolls Royce?
Yes. Because I was taking over what was not a very successful radio station, I got on the phone and called everyone I knew in radio and said, what have you done, seen, or heard about that knocked a home run? And one of my friends that used to work with me in Little Rock goes, oh, Gary, we gave away a Rolls Royce. And I go, yeah, right, I'm in Beaumont, Texas. That's not going to happen. She says, well, let me send you the stuff and, see what you think. Well, she sent it to me. It was a 20-year-old Rolls Royce. So I found a 20-year-old Rolls Royce in Beaumont, Texas, and the reason the old couple sold it to me is because they were embarrassed, because every time they pulled up to a stoplight, everyone would stop until they left because they were trying to see in who was driving the Rolls Royce. So I bought well, wait a second. Dick Oppenheimer, the rich Jewish businessman that owns the chain, flies in on his private plane with his comptroller for the next year's budget, and I show him the budget, and he goes, oh, Gary, this is very aggressive. How do you plan on hitting this percentage increase? And I pulled out KQXY, rolls out the red carpet. And he goes, what's this? And I go, I want to give away a Rolls Royce. And Dick Oppenheimer, being the smart businessman he was, turns to the last page and sees how much it's going to cost and sails it across the room towards the trash can. He said, now seriously, Gary, how are you going to hit these numbers? And I walk over and pick it up. And 2 hours later, with screaming and yelling, he goes, okay, you blankety blank blank, I'm going to pay for this. But if you don't cover the cost of this promotion with new advertisers, you're not going to get a burial. And he didn't say Christian burial. He said another other kind of burial. And I reached in my drawer and I pulled out 2 contracts that covered the cost with new advertising. He goes, why didn't you show me these 2 hours ago? I go, well, Dick, those were my whole cards. I wasn't going to pull them out unless I needed them. We gave away our first one. I bought the station the next year, and I decided to do the promotion again because it was so successful. And he goes, Teeny, you're paying for this one. You're buying the station. So I bought the second one, and it worked so well. Then I gave away a third one the next year.
Now, you also had some TV work. You had the good fortune of working. So someone bought you radio stations, correct?
Yep.
They needed the frequency or whatever?
Yeah. So we sold the stations to a guy who had the #1 country station in the market, which he didn't need our sales staff, he didn't need our office staff, he didn't my on-air staff. So I convinced my entire staff to stay through the sale, and I promised them that I'd get them jobs other places. And I actually got every single one of my team a job in radio, except one who said, Gary, I don't want to do radio anymore, I'm going back to retail, and I got her a job at the department store chain.
Now, my assumption is as you transitioned, the sales went down in that time?
Well, my salespeople came back and said, nobody wants to buy. All they want to talk about is the station being sold. So I came up with a going out of business sale. And clients would call me saying, T, you're not going to believe what one of your salespeople just brought in, a going out of business sale. I go, well, we're going out of business. He goes, well, and I go, hey, how long have you been on the radio station? 9 years. Did you make money each year? Well, yeah, I'm really upset that you're leaving. I'm going, well, I'm only going to be on the air 3 more months. So if you want to make any more money, you better spend the last 3 months. We blew the doors off. It was amazing. Business came out of the woods.
So then you had a transition after you sold. You actually worked with Roger Staubach on a TV show.
First CBS.
Yeah.
I left CBS to go to work with Roger Staubach. One of my clients said, he said, Gary, let's have lunch. He was a GM from the car business, and I thought he just wanted to catch up, and he was telling me he had a show called Inside Houston. The CBS anchor had been fired, and he really liked her. And so he said, hey, let's have lunch, and do you miss being on TV? And she said, yeah, I really do. And he said, how about I produce a show and make you the host? And she goes, okay. And he did, and he got a Houston Astro player to be the co-host, and they interviewed businesses, and he said he was going to open in Dallas. And I said, oh, great, who are you going to get for your news anchor? And he said, ooh, there's this beautiful girl with NBC. She's been in the market about 10 years. She's going to be my news host. And I said, oh, who's going to be your sports host? Because I knew him. And he goes, Roger Staubach. And I go, wow, how did you get Roger Staubach? And he goes, well, Gary, that's why we're having lunch. I want you to hire him. I go, I don't know Roger Staubach. I just know of him.
And he just, if someone doesn't know who he is, he's a Super Bowl winning Dallas
Cowboy quarterback. And I said, Don, there's shrines to Roger in Dallas, man. And so a month later, we're sitting in Roger's office, and we're going to pay him $10,000 a shoot. And Roger goes, well, I did this show with Peggy Fleming, and boy, she's just an angel, and it was so nice. But it was about those exercise equipment, and people would say, Roger, why are you doing commercials? And so I'm not going to do any more of those. So I'm thinking, well, I just wasted a month of money, for Don, because this ain't happening. He said, but yours is about businesses, so I'll do it now. Roger Staubach had 2 businesses. One was speaking engagements, where he would get football players or him or Coach Landry to speak. And the other was he leased space for big business. So he'd lease a building, or he'd lease 3 floors of a building, and he would make the money off that. And so we hired Roger. And Don and I walked out of Roger's office, gave each other a high five, and I went, oh, blank. And Don goes, what's the matter? And I go, we don't have offices, we don't have furniture, we don't have phones, we don't have any employees, and we've got Roger. And from a dead stop, 1 year later, we had done $1,050,000 with Inside Dallas, and that was pretty exciting.
And the fun fact that you shared with me was you only saw him upset one time. And can you share that? Because I thought that was pretty cool.
Guys, if anyone's ever had the pleasure of knowing Roger Staubach, he's an angel. The only time I ever saw him upset was someone said something negative about Coach Landry. And it looked like Staubach could have bit his head off. Roger would charge $12,000 for a 1-hour speech. He would charge $14,000 for Coach Landry because Roger didn't believe he was worth more than Coach Landry. He so dearly loved that man. And the honor that Roger brought into every single thing he did was beyond belief. The first day, Don and I are so impressed. We have a buffet, like on 2 long tables with everything you can imagine, out there. And Roger comes in, and the makeup person and the grips and the cameramen he's just nice to everyone. And at the end, he says, Gary, you know, I eat a grapefruit with my daughter every morning, so if you're doing this for me, you don't have to, but if you're doing it for the team, I'm sure they appreciate it. I go, yeah, I guess I can save about $1,000, you know. I was really trying to impress Roger, so we did a lot less fancy food at the shoots after that. But that's the kind of guy Roger was. He was just a great gentleman.
So then you got recruited back to your roots, right?
Well, one of my best friends, the godfather to my first child, I'm godfather, he says, Gary, Ed wants to hire you. Ed Munez owned 2 radio stations. He'd been a competitor of mine for 10 years in New Orleans. And he said, come in and for the big party, the Mardi Gras party, because Ed was the captain of Endymion also, and they'd have a big Mardi Gras party every year. And I go, I have no intention. I'm going to open inside Washington, D.C. And he goes, no, he'll fly you in, and you stay with me, and we'll have a great time. And then you can go to D.C. And I go, okay, I'll do that. And Ed goes, Teeny, here's the deal. I want you to run my 2 stations. I go, no, Ed, I can't do it. And he's talking and going back and forth. And he says, here's what I'm going to pay you. And I, ooh, nice 6 figures. And I said, so how would you split that on base and bonus? And he goes, no, that's what I'm going to pay you. And I said, Ed, you can't pay someone that much without having attachments to it. And he goes, Teeny, you were a competitor of mine for 10 years. I can pay you that much. So that's how I ended up back in New Orleans.
So then for someone that was so successful in all these amazing things, what brought you to Tampa?
Fell madly head over heels in love with a girl that one of my other best friends brought up to Jazz Fest, and she couldn't get transferred with Coca-Cola to New Orleans, so I packed up my bags and came down here.
And that's your wife, Anita, right?
Yeah. Am I a lucky guy or what? Yeah.
And then how did you get into consulting? Because here locally we know you as a consultant, but you've lived 9 lives in business. How did that manifest?
Well, I guess that's a 2-part story. Number one, radio advertising, you might take $5,000 a month from somebody, and they sign a piece of paper, and they get airwaves. And so I would go into a business a week or so after advertising started, and I'd go, where's the merchandise we're promoting on all the ads? And they go, Gary, we put it behind the counter so people have to ask us for it so we know the advertising's working. I go, that's not how it works. So I discovered I had to teach my clients how to actually market, because if it didn't work, they blamed me. They didn't blame themselves. So I started, and especially once I became an owner, then I would ask them, hey, I just spent $100,000 on billboards, and I didn't hear radio stations click on all over town. What do you do with your advertising to make it work? And we really became, you're in this and I'm in this, let's get through this together, kind of a partnership as the owner of 2 radio stations. And once I started doing that, my whole relationship with advertisers shifted.
So how did it happen here in Tampa?
Well, I was at a party with some friends. One of them owned a business, and she was having some problems with her business, and I was telling her what I thought she should do, and my wife and one of our other best friends are just laughing uncontrollably. And I'm going, what is so funny? And they said, Teeny, you need to start consulting businesses. And so I started working for a national consulting company, and my wife goes, honey, the last 5 of the last 6 trips you took, 5 of them were overnights. They would call me and say, Gary, there's a ticket to Los Angeles. You've got a 9 o'clock appointment in the morning with so-and-so, so-and-so. And I go, we have consultants in California. Why are you sending me from Florida? They go, Gary, this is a big problem. We need you to deal with it. And I decided, you know, that doesn't make sense. I'm going to start doing it here. So that's how I opened my business.
And you had your friend Ricky P., right?
Oh, yeah. Rick is who introduced me to my wife. He's got the restaurant, Ricky P's, and he had a catering job, or he'd be here tonight, because he's a champion.
So as someone that champions local business, the one thing that I do want to mention is your acumen for business is very astute, because you became a specialist. Instead of just being a consultant, you became a specialist for government contracts.
Yeah.
Why did you choose that, and how did that help you build your practice?
Well, because I dealt with government, with the FCC and the FTC and the FAA, dealing with radio stations, and FCC is Federal Communication Commission. He hates it when I use alpha. FTC is a Federal Trade Commission. When I put together 5 formats to go after 25% of newspaper budgets, because they had a whole lot more budget percentage of the market than radio stations had. And the FAA, when I wanted to build a 1,000-foot tower south of the interstate, as opposed to where all the other towers north were, me and 4 other owners flew up on one of the owners' first plane to Dallas and spent about 2 hours with the FAA head regional guy. And about 2 hours into it, I said, "Sir, it doesn't sound like you're going to let me build that tower south of the interstate." And he said, "Boy, I've been telling you that for about 2 hours. You know, I got too many shirt-tailed pilots that use the interstate as their navigation system, and it ain't going to happen." So I was pretty good with government. I thought the economy was going to go a little south. I had no idea it would go as south as it did. So I told all of my clients, we need to look at all revenue streams. And I started helping clients win government contracts. And that became actually the way I market my business, because typically 2 weeks to so they go, "Hey, you actually know what you're talking about. I've got this problem I could use some help with."
You've helped a lot of people. You have a pretty amazing story. I have one last picture, and it's I think you and Buddy at Ricky P's. And the way I see you is everybody's cheerleader, and the business owners that know you, you're just, when you walk into a room, you light it up. So I just want to thank you for telling your story.
Do you mind if I tell the Buddy story?
Yeah.
Buddy is a Down syndrome. Last year he turned 21. The doctors, when he was born, said he's probably only going to last 4 or 5 years. Buddy is the brightest light on the planet. Buddy sees you and he runs and leaps. Now, he's 21 years old and he leaps in my arms, and I'll be sitting next to him and they'll set a cheeseburger down in front of him. He'll go, "Cheeseburger, my favorite." And the next time I'm with him, they might set a hot dog down. "Hot dog, my favorite." And then it might be pizza. "Pizza, my favorite." I decided I was going to channel Buddy. And I happen to be a pretty enthusiastic guy, but any time I'd ever run into something that wasn't quite as much fun as I'd like it to be, I'd go, "My favorite," because Buddy lived his life with my favorite. And I actually have friends of mine in business that now channel Buddy, and they're not quite as enthusiastic, and they'll call me, "Gary, it's Monday, my favorite," you know. So I invite you all to channel Buddy and get as much pleasure out of it as I do.
Well, thank you for channeling Gary for us today. Gary, thank you on such short notice being our keynote. Guys, let's give Gary a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, man.